While you know morale is important, it's often covered in broad strokes, when in reality, morale, especially wartime morale, is quite a complex and interesting topic, and possibly the most important factor in deciding the outcome of a war. In this video, we're going to discuss the causes and effects of low and high morale, drawing examples from the Second World War. So just what is morale? You know, it's actually quite difficult to define. It isn't tangible like bullets and blood, but many notable World War II era figures have done a decent job of putting it into words. Veteran and historian Paul Fussell, for instance, defined morale as prevailing mood and spirit, conducive to willing and dependable performance, and courageous, determined conduct despite danger, based upon a conviction of being in the right and on the way to success, and upon faith in the cause and in the leadership. A confident, aggressive, resolute cooperation in a common effort. Respected war correspondent Ernie Pyle said, "I've been around war long enough to know that 9/10 of morale is pride in your outfit and confidence in your leaders and fellow fighters. And a lot of people have morale confused with the desire to fight. I don't know of one soldier out of 10,000 who wants to fight." Of course, morale isn't limited to the military, and civilian morale is just as important for winning wars. At the end of the day, as sociologist Alexander H. Lighton put it, morale is the capacity of a group to pull together persistently and consistently in pursuit of a common purpose. And a group can be anything, including an entire nation or even an alliance of nations. We can also consider morale on an individual level, of course. Though, just what are the causes and effects of low morale? Well, there are many factors which lead to low soldier morale, and they all interact with each other in some way too. On an individual level, poor hygiene, unsuitable clothing, a lack of food, and poor battlefield conditions are surefire ways to send a soldier's morale plummeting. No one wants to be filthy, cold, and hungry, and when our basic physiological needs are denied, we fall apart. Other important physiological factors that decrease morale include a lack of camaraderie, lack of credit, and a lack of pride in one's unit. If the soldier doesn't care about the other soldiers in their unit, isn't being rewarded for their hard work and suffering, and isn't proud to be in the unit, why would they want to fight and potentially die for it? On a slightly grander scale, poor training and leadership are also express tickets to low morale.
There should be no fence here.
We could go over it, sir.
As are poor rest, rotation, and replacement systems. If a soldier hasn't been trained to recognize and improve low morale, or the officer in charge of them is unable to do this, it makes sense that their morale will plummet. If a soldier can't get a moment's rest or sees no end in sight, even if it's temporary, that can really take a toll on their morale and, of course, add to their exhaustion, which only worsens morale. And we haven't even considered battlefield outcomes and casualties yet. No one likes losing, and no one wants to watch their friends die, nor sustain injuries themselves. Image this on a grander scale, say in World War II, when hundreds of thousands of soldiers perished in single battles. Imagine how it would affect your morale to lose your home city after fighting for it for months or even years. Other important, more sinister causes to consider include demoralization propaganda, meaning propaganda created by the enemy to drain a military force's morale. So what exactly are the effects of low morale? In the end, it boils down to poor unit cohesion and losing lives and wars. Soldiers with low morale are more inclined to disobey orders, self-wound, or fake illnesses to escape the battlefield or straight up desert. They are also more prone to exhaustion and, in turn, breaking under the stress of combat. Exhausted soldiers are more likely to put other soldiers' lives and the mission at risk. Before we move on to civilian morale, the US Army Service Forces Manual M207, Building Morale in the ASF, published in 1944, detailed its low morale indicators. These included excessive AWOL or desertion cases, excessive amount of company punishment, inattention during training session, high venereal disease rates, large number of court-martials, large number of troop quarrels, large number of transfer requests, carelessness in dress, saluting, etc., carelessness with military equipment, large numbers of malingerers, slow response to commands, and high sick rates. Back on the home front, civilian morale is very much influenced by the state of a war and the husbands, fathers, sons, and brothers fighting in it. If soldier morale is low, there's a good chance it will cripple morale back home. Additionally, a war can come home with civilian populations enduring stresses like blackouts, rationing, evacuation, and bombing, to name a few. Clearly, these sorts of things have a negative impact on civilian wartime morale. But why is it important? To put it simply, civilians can be trained to become soldiers, and civilian production sustains the war. Without civilian labor, especially in munitions productions, a military starves, and so does a wartime economy. Also, low morale can lead to social upheaval and potentially reduce the effectiveness of home defense, especially in the face of invasion and occupation. It could be said that the 1940 fall of France was a manifestation of low morale, for example. As we've discussed in a previous video, not every French soldier's spirit was broken by the German Blitzkrieg, though indeed, morale, coupled with poor training and leadership, which are causes of low morale, was a deciding factor in this battle. French military doctrine and leadership were simply outplayed by the lightning-quick Germans, and the defeatist attitudes all throughout the country didn't help either. The French people were politically divided, and French Prime Minister Paul Renard gave up before the battle was over. On the 15th of May, he called Winston Churchill and said, "We have been defeated. We are beaten. We have lost the battle." As for a civilian example, we needn't look further than strategic bombing, and specifically the bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. In general, both Axis and Allied forces targeted civilian populations in various bombing campaigns to cripple their enemy's morale. This is indeed a high cost to pay, so they must have thought the ends justified the means. The February 1945 firebombing of Dresden was a direct attack on a militarily insignificant city, designed to deal a war-winning blow to German morale. It did not end the war with Germany, but it certainly devastated the residents of Dresden, with some 25,000 burning alive in their streets and homes. The atomic bombings of Japan, in contrast, did win the Allies the war against the Japanese. The sheer destructive forces of the bombs sent ripples through the Japanese people, eroding their once strong morale to dust and forcing their leaders' hands. So, what about high morale? In many ways, its causes and effects are the opposites of the causes and effects of low morale. To reiterate, good hygiene, suitable clothing, plenty of food, and favorable battlefield conditions all boost a soldier's morale, as do camaraderie and recognition of hard work and bravery. Soldiers taught about the importance of morale can recognize and cope with low morale better, and properly trained officers can effectively bolster the morale of men under their charge. The occasional break from combat can work wonders too. As for losing battles and taking casualties, these are sometimes just the realities of war, but soldiers whose morale is higher before these events occur may be able to cope with them better. Just as a military can cripple another military's morale with propaganda, so too can they boost their own, and there is also something to be said for fighting on one's home soil. It tends to be a powerful motivator in itself. As for the civilian population, believing your troops are winning battles is a huge morale booster. I say believing because what we hear isn't necessarily true. What happens on the battlefield sometimes stays on the battlefield, and sometimes it's flipped on its head, meaning that via propaganda, civilians may not always get an accurate picture of war, which may be for the better. Either way, the media is a vector for morale, and the speeches of world leaders can have profound effect on the civilian population. Not having to ration your food and resources or to flee your home, and not getting bombed, are pretty good morale boosters too. A great example of a specific battle which boosted Allied military morale is the Second Battle of El Alamein. While the Allies had taken some victories in this time, their last major victory before the late 1942 Battle of El Alamein was in Operation Crusader the year before. In late 1942, Germany had just taken Greece and Japan had just taken Singapore, leaving British morale, especially, at an all-time low. But in Alamein, Britain and her Commonwealth allies banded together and achieved a decisive victory over Rommel's Afrika Korps and the Italians. In this battle, the Allies boasted air superiority, to which Montgomery attributed high morale throughout the battle, stating, "The sight and sound of our air forces operating against the enemy have a great morale effect on our troops." Montgomery also deemed morale the most important single factor in a war. Also, Winston Churchill said, "Before Alamein, we never had a victory. After Alamein, we never had a defeat." An example of a civilian population which maintained a reasonably high morale throughout World War II is that of Britain. This was largely due to their strong, charismatic Prime Minister, effective morale campaigns, and the fact the Germans brought the fight to Britain. Fighting over the skies of their own cities strengthened British resolve, and its pilots especially attained celebrity status, becoming figures behind which the British people could rally. In reality, however, the British were in debt to the Americans after the war, and their production pales before the Yanks. On the US, as we've said in a previous video, their home front propaganda was perhaps the best in the war, vastly improving civilian morale. But what do you think? Did you find this more niche topic interesting? Do you think morale is as vital to winning war as we say it is? Can you think of any other battles won or lost because of morale? Let us know in the comments section below. And just before you go, guys, if you want to join our wider community, make sure you check us out on Facebook, Instagram, and Discord, where you can check out exclusive posts you won't find on this channel. And if you want access to an exclusive monthly video, then do check out our Patreon as well. Anyways, guys, as always, thank you so much for watching, and I hope you learned something new.